Hi and welcome to Bike Speeds. So this week we're cleaning up this Giant Defy. It's the aluminium version. You can see here it's weathered. It's been standing in the garden and just needed bringing back to rideable condition. You can see it's a lot of rust, surface rust and cobwebs, and you can just see generally where it's stood for a little while. So this is our service and clean and detail on this bike to bring it back to some kind of condition. The Giant Defy, in my opinion, makes a great bike for a winter bike because it's the aluminium version like this anyway, because it's external cable routed, which means it's very easy on maintenance and it's very durable, and especially in this configuration it's fairly entry level group set, so it's a perfect bike for a winter bike. It's not going to cost you a lot of money to run this bike, and likewise for your town bike, for your normal riding, it's just the perfect road bike for that scenario. So you can see we're beginning to strip it down. It needed new handlebar tape, so we've already removed that here and cleaned all the old glue and sticky off, and off comes the wheel, the rusty chain. The chain was seized in a couple of links, so it wasn't turning nicely around the gears, so we had to take that off. And we start off by getting this cassette off. You can see how grimy that is. It needs a good degrease, so in the degreaser it goes. This is an ultrasonic cleaner with a water-based degreaser. Quick release skewer there. You can see the spring is on the wrong way around. Quite a common problem on a lot of road bikes. I see that. It makes mounting the wheel tricky to almost impossible on some wheels, depending on the dropout. We had this nylon sort of tangled up here. Obviously something's got tangled in there at some point, so we just had to remove the cup on the bearing. Now the Derailleur hanger here, you can see it was actually moving on the frame. It actually come loose in its fittings. That's actually something quite common with any Derailleur hanger where it has those little bolts that hold it on. They'll often come loose, so it's just something to keep an eye on. So we got the derailleur off there and the jockey wheels onto the bench. We never degrease those because there's varying levels of jockey wheels. Some are just like a nylon wheel with a central pivot, and as these were, more entry-level group sets have those. Next up from that you have a ceramic centre with the pivot point, and then in the high-end group sets you have a bearing, so you just have to see what you've got and do your servicing accordingly. So next up we're taking off the front derailleur. You can see a little bit of surface rust on this, but you can see overall the condition of that is quite good. Just needed cleaning up and a little bit of detailing really. But we were giving this bike a full-on frame detail, so off come the chain set as well. You can see behind there a lot of grime, and on the back of this you can see it wasn't too badly worn, but it's just a little bit rusty, a little bit brown, and just needs cleaning up. I didn't take the pedals off these. I never actually go an in-depth clean on a pedal unless it's a specific pedal service, because pedals are so cheap in general that you don't want to be really degreasing the bearings in a pedal. You want to leave them as they are, so I rarely take those off. Now the bolt cage here you can see was broken, and it had rubber grommets holding it on to space it from the derailleur, so we improved that when we rebuilt the bike, which I'll show you in detail a little bit further on. So next up we're cleaning those jockey wheels off. A little bit of soapy water doesn't do them any harm. It's not going to, especially in the bearing versions, they've got their bearing seals, so the water shouldn't penetrate through those seals, providing you don't dunk it and leave it in an ultrasonic cleaner, so we can clean those up nicely. And then as you can see the first batch of parts are coming out now, so we're just washing that rear derailleur down and the cassette, and it's all beginning to look pretty good, pretty sharp. Especially that nice chrome cassette on that. That always looks good when you put that back on the bike. These more entry-level versions, I think this was a 9-speed, tend to be chrome-plated steel. It's only when you get up to the Ultegras and Dura-Aces where you get your titanium chain rings and various chain rings. So this is our second batch going into the degreaser now. Next up we split down the chain set. I wanted to really get in depth on this one, so we took that completely apart, and all the nuts and bolts and rings and everything went into the degreaser. This is our second batch coming out, which was the brakes, so we give them a wash down, and then I also use a brass bristle brush there and a little bit of wire wool to get the surface rust off of the springs and the bolts and various things. Now this is the mounting bolt or mounting nut spacer that was quite rusty, so we filed that down with a diamond file, and then we would either replace or clean. It really depended on what the level of service was that we were doing for the customer, but in this case we cleaned it up, and then when we remounted that I put copper slip on that to stop it sticking to the frame again. Next up the chain rings, give them a good wash down, and everything is beginning to look nice now, ready to go back on the bike. We always sort of do all the mechanical parts we clean first because it's quite a time consuming process, and yeah, it's sort of when you get to the end of this part of it, you're always like phew, and then you go onto the frame and that gives you an invigoration. Mint soap spray there, and then wash around this is the wheels. So we've done all the components, now we're just doing the wheels. Again, spokes and all this is very time consuming. Just use a nylon brush in there to get into the center of that hub, just to really clean that up. And then now I'm just using a resin polish around the rim. It helps clean up the braking, like the road film that's on that braking surface. The polish helps clean that off. It's a resin based polish, so it protects that wheel as well very, very nicely. Next up, we're just greasing the free hub before putting the cassette on. Just use white grease on that, and then a little bit of copper slip on the lock nut, torqued up to 40 Newton meters. And this is an example of what we do here. There was white grease on the shaft of that quick release, copper slip on the bolt, and then you'll see when we actually put it back on the wheel a little bit further on the video, we then oil the actual lever itself. So there's 3 lots of lubricant just on a quick release, and that's sort of the in-depth way we like to service all our bikes at bike speeds. So now we're just putting the chain set back together, and we did notice that the pedals, this little metal frame on them was loose, so we tightened it up as well, and it's the details that we do. So next up, derailleur, oil the pivot points, white grease on the center of the jockey wheels, Loctite on the little bolts that hold those jockey wheels, and then a little bit of white grease again on the other jockey wheel, Loctite, and then finally we use the genuine Shimano grease on the springs in the center. So again, you can see there's 2 or 3, sometimes 4 lubricants on each component that we're servicing. You can see that Shimano grease there. It's a green colour. Shimano make a good grease really, so we use that quite regularly. And then this is actually day 2 of our process. We spent a day doing all the components, and now this is day 2 where we're washing the bike down with soapy water and a big softie, and then we dry that off with microfiber towel before we begin the in-depth cleaning, which you can see here. Nylon brush on the bottom bracket, clean out all that grease. That looks almost like a new one now. Next up, we just measure the paint depth and thickness just to make sure it will take polishing, because we plan on T-cutting this frame to really get that road grit film and grease and marks off of that frame, which is what we're now doing. This is one of the most time consuming processes of the entire bike, is T-cutting the frame. It takes a long while, you've got to be patient. Little bits here and there, you can see like the marks coming off. It makes a massive difference to the way a bike presents once it's completed. If you are here and it's your first time, please like and subscribe. We're very pleased with the way subscribers are coming along, so if you're new to the channel, pleased to have you here with us. Do subscribe, hit the notification bell. We publish every Wednesday generally at 7 o'clock. Be sure to come and see us next Wednesday as well if you haven't seen us before. And then once we've T-cutted the frame, now we're on to the super resin polish. This Auto Glim is a beautiful polish. It's the one that's my polish of choice. Now this will clean off any residue of T-cut or road film and put that little protective layer on the bike that will make cleaning it next time far easier, because that dryness within the paint, this brings that paint to a good shine, which means your new debris is not going to stick so hard and fast as it would to a dry and matte frame. So you can see the reflections on that frame, how that's now much shinier than it was as we're putting it back together. Everything's torqued, so pedal arms on, torqued, all the components will go on. You'll see as we do the service further on, everything is torqued. So we're now refitting that derailleur hanger that was loose. On goes the derailleur. We don't, you can see I torque them out, but we don't torque any of the cables and things until we're absolutely 100% happy with the way everything's changed. So you can see there I just put a little bit of copper slip on that nut that I was talking about when we cleaned before, a little bit of copper slip on these, just stops them sticking to the frame in future, makes future servicing far easier. You don't get that corrosion build up that you would without it, which you don't get when the bike's built new, which is why you get that corrosion, because although they do grease certain parts in a factory, they're not thinking long term, they're just producing the bike. So you're servicing, what your bike shop's doing for you is future proofing your servicing with the bike. So next up, we've got new brake cables. We did all the cables on this bike. you know, if you're going to this level of detailing and cleaning a bike, then it's well worth getting your cables done. In fact, you can't really do it without. This is having new cables right through. We had that lock on the front, on the top bar there, that the customer never took off, and we had to work around that for the weekend, but it is what it is. We get around these things. Gears now. So both those outers come out the side of the handlebars, which again means that if you're using this bike through the winter and you need to change your gear cables, it's far easier than with handlebar tape in there. So we've just got a little bit of bling on this bike. We've got a little nice gold chain on here for the customer. It certainly looks a little bit different to the old rusty one that was on there, that's for sure. So yeah, I like these gold chains. They always pop out when you put a gold chain on a bike. Now we're just adjusting up the rear derailleur there before we do the front, so we get that spinning nicely, and then we put it in the easiest gear, and that allows us to adjust our high and low screws on the front derailleur, which both needed adjusting, which means they were never right on this bike in the first place. So because you shouldn't have to adjust those once set to the bike, they're set for life. The only adjustments you should really make is to the thumb adjusters on your gears themselves, and even those very rarely, you shouldn't have to be doing it weekly. It should just be as the cables gradually give over time. So next up, we're adjusting the brakes. You can see the rust has all but gone on that front one there. It's looking a lot better than when we started, and then the little tails and ends are all done the same length. And then with this bike we were just redoing the bar tape as well, so that's the new fresh bar tape going on there. Just finish the ends. I like to try and make it where you can't see the ends, where they're always underneath, so that was just a little detail on there which you didn't really get on camera. A little bit of copper slip on these frame bolts that stop them sticking again, which means they should always come undone. And then we fit the new bottle cage, but you can see I put a spacer in there rather than a rubber grommet to clear that front derailleur bracket, which for some reason was very close to that bottle cage. It was a little bit of a poor design really on the Giant's part, but that is what it is. So next up, this is sort of the final stage of the service, talking through every nut and bolt and fitting on the bike, the brake pads, the pinch bolt, the mount itself. You know, you just got to work your way through a bike, talking everything as you go, and then you know that bike, when you collect it or when I've finished it, is absolutely spot on. You know, we do every single nut and bolt on a job like this. And just through experience you get to know what your torque settings are, but a lot of components have them written on them, and you've just got to look out for them. But like I say, just through experience you get to know. And then just give the old tyres a pump up. The front one, as you'll see now, had a different coloured valve cap on it. The green is usually when they've got slime in them. This didn't have that, but I changed that for a black one to match the back. And then finally we just use a silicone detailing spray on this bike. It just stops your initial road film sticking to that bike. Even after polishing, it comes up beautiful with that. And as you can see in these before and after shots, what a difference we made to this bike. It went from a bike that was in a garden derelict to a bike you'd be quite proud to ride. So thanks for watching. Come back next week and see us again.